And House Oversight Committee Chair Darrell Issa joins us. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. I'm glad that's over, aren't you?
Well, it was quite fascinating. Let me start first with Lois Lerner, her emails. But before I even ask you about the specific emails you have shown at the hearing today, have you obtained all her emails?
No, we haven't. The IRS continues to fail to comply with our subpoena to deliver many of her emails.
What is their explanation why they won't turn over? Because you have the authority as an oversight committee to have those emails.
They have no excuse for not turning them over. As a matter of fact, we've said turn them over to the Ways and Means Committee, who also has a request, and they've made a partial discovery. And as you know from your background in law, the last ones you get are often the ones you wanted most.
All right. Have they said when they're going to give them to you?
They have not.
All right. All right. Let's go to the emails now. In one of the emails from Lois Lerner, it says, I mean, basically, as I understand it, your theory is that the reason for the targeting is because the IRS, particularly people at the IRS, didn't like the Tea Party, and also they didn't like the Supreme Court decision, Citizens United. It
appears from the emails that Lois Lerner specifically felt that whoever they are, they were pressuring the IRS to fix what the FEC, her former employer, couldn't fix after Citizens United, a court case that the president once shook his finger at the U.S. Supreme Court in the House, in the well of the House, because he didn't like.
In fact, we have that video of when the president did make that remark about showing he didn't like that decision. Let's look at that video at the State of the Union.
With all due deference to separation of powers, last week the Supreme Court reversed a century of law that I believe will open the floodgates for special interests, including foreign corporations, to spend without limit in our elections. And I'd urge Democrats and Republicans to pass a bill that helps correct some of these problems.
Now, the Supreme Court didn't like that. At least one member of the Supreme Court, I remember from that night. Is it your theory that that sort of is the beginning of this narrative, that the president was signaling that something was to be done about this?
The emails in which Lois Lerner seems to be the hub of activity include consideration of a rule similar to the one they're proposing now to try to rein in 501c4s. Oddly enough, Organized for Action, the president's own super PAC, is a 501c4. But it appears as though she was working that track and also working the track of trying to do what the FEC couldn't do, in this case by simply not allowing these Tea Party and Patriot named organizations to go forward.
What I thought was, what actually jumped out at me, at least in one of these emails, it says, and everyone is up in arms because they don't like it. The everyone meaning that, I mean, who's the everyone?
Well, everyone who's a Democrat seems to be up in arms. Quite frankly, this is an example of a pretty partisan view of the world when you say everyone and they want us to fix it. Again, we don't want the IRS to fix problems determined by the president. That's exactly what the IRS is supposed to be above, is political influence.
Are you going to seek to hold her in contempt for not answering the questions?
Well, you know, the Speaker called that he thought that was appropriate today. Our committee will consider it. I've conferred with some of my members. I plan on meeting with them before we leave this week, and we could consider doing it as early as next week.
Chairman, right after the hearing, we also spoke with Representative Cummings. Here's what he told on the record to Griff Jenkins.
To date, I have not seen any evidence that shows where this was politically motivated or that the White House had anything to do with it. But yet and still, those assertions are being made by Republicans. I've said it over and over again. All I want is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. You cannot have a fair investigation where you only present evidence that you like and exclude evidence that you don't like. And I've asked that of the chairman. For some reason, the chairman did not want to hear what I had to say today. He closed the hearing barring me from saying one syllable.
What was your reaction? He turned the mics off, actually. For our audience at home, they turned the microphones off on you.
I thought it was extremely unfortunate. That is just not the way a democracy runs. This is still America. And I would fight for his right to say what he had to say for the Republican side. I would fight for the right of Tea Partiers because I believe in this democracy. I believe that when you have members on the Democratic side and members on the Republican side, they should have their say. You can't have a hearing without hearing one syllable from the other side.
So fair to say that Chairman Issa could do more. Do you believe he's driven by political motivation?
What I'm hoping, what I was trying to do was accomplish what he was trying to accomplish. That is, get some information. We walked out there with nothing, with no information. We could have probably gotten the attorney to at least proffer to tell us exactly what she would have said. Now, you know, she's going to have to face, she'll eventually probably end up in court. And at some point, a court will determine whether she must testify or not. But in the meantime, if we really want to get to the bottom of this, I think the appropriate thing today, once she said she was not going to testify, to at least be able to get a proffer. That's all I was trying to do.
Mr. Chairman, has Congressman Cummings joined you in requesting all the emails from the IRS?
No, never. It's you know,
I mean, because that really, to me, that's the most potent information, because that'll either exonerate or convict essentially Lois Lerner.
Mr. Cummings is there with the president on not a smidgen of evidence. We've never sat in committee and said this leads to the president. As a matter of fact, our evidence leads to Lois Lerner, and that's why we'd hope to hear from her. You know, if the ranking member had wanted to make a motion before I adjourned, I would have accepted it. I adjourned. He then said he had a question. What you played there was that what was after an adjournment, he then perked up and said, I want to ask a question. I said, what is your question? And then that exchange occurred because he didn't have a question. He was simply endlessly slandering the efforts of the committee. But having said that, we want to get to the truth. If the attorney had a proffer, which, as you know, would be, tell us, don't tell us your client's innocent, tell us what we need to know. And he's never offered to do that. We've worked with his attorney. To be quite frank, his attorney in writing had supported the idea that she would testify under certain conditions. As we began rolling out a little bit of what we intended to do in the hearing as far as questions, she decided not to testify.
All right. Well, did you share with Mr. Cummings, Congressman Cummings, before this hearing, her emails in which she says, for instance, the Tea Party matter very dangerous? Did you share that with Mr. Cummings?
Well, these emails were when the discovery comes in from the IRS, it goes to both of us together. So simultaneously, they've been receiving the same emails, the same information. They've been in every single one of 33 interviews. This is not something where we're asking questions behind closed doors. Attorneys for the House's Ways and Means Committee and the Oversight Committee have been in every one of these, Republicans and Democrats, and all the discovery has come to both committees. All
right, I've suggested, I've been pounding you for a long time about being more aggressive at getting information out of Lois Lerner. I see that you need information from the IRS. You need her emails. Have you thought of even seeking to hold the commissioner in contempt for failure to comply with the subpoena? Because if you've given a lawful subpoena to the IRS, it's his responsibility, and this is now almost a year old.
Well, you're exactly right. And just a few weeks ago, we issued to the new commissioner a fresh subpoena.
He doesn't need a fresh one.
No,
the subpoena is to the IRS.
No, I understand. But now that he is in charge of the custody of these, we wanted to give him an absolute straight chance. But there's no question, if he fails to comply with the delivery to the committees of Congress, then we would have no choice but to hold, as we did Eric Holder for withholding information, we'd have the same situation with the commission.
All right, you mentioned Eric Holder, and according to at least one report, it says the officials from the Department of Justice told the Wall Street Journal that thus far, meaning in January, investigators have found no evidence of the type of enemy hunting that would warrant federal criminal charges being filed. Do you know if they had these emails? Because it might make them a little more suspicious.
Well, we don't know if they're interviewing anyone to speak of. It appears as though they're not doing a very active investigation. Everything that we have delivered by subpoena, they certainly could have received simultaneously, and they could have gotten additional information. Look, the U.S. Attorney in the District of Columbia has declined prosecutions of federal workers who falsified work documents, who stole from the government, even one person who bonused her own daughter using, under the anti-nepotism rules, using funds of the committee, of the agency she worked for. We're very disappointed in Eric Holder's willingness to go after white-collar crime inside the federal government.